Hey guys, welcome to Tabletop Never Stop. Today we're going to go over the Stark combat units. I now have my Kickstarter. I would be painting it, but it's really hot in my garage, so I thought I'd do this instead. So first off, we have our Stark Sworn Swords. They cost 5 points, so they're the cheapest, I guess, real unit in the Stark army. They have a movement of 5. They hit on 4s. They actually have a pretty good dice line, 8-6-5 for such a cheap unit. Defense save of 4+, kind of standard Stark morale of 6+. Then the big thing about these guys is their Stark Fury. It gives them +1 to hit and critical blows, which is 6s deal 2 hits. And then they take D3 wounds after that, unless of course they're already on the last rank. So this is a good ability. It basically turns them in from like a mediocre unit to a good one at the cost of D3 wounds. I would not use it in every scenario, but you know, whenever there's a chance that you can knock an enemy out or down into a lower rank, it's probably worth it. Shoot, you might roll a 1 and only take 1 wound, then it's totally worth it. And then of course, once you're down to your last rank, there's really no cost at all, and you just get, you know, to be better than you were. It's just hit really hard for like a baseline unit, which is good, and that's what you'd expect from the Starks. As far as attachments go, because it's a cheap unit, you can throw attachments on here without getting too like worked up about it, and it's they're fairly defensive as long as you don't Stark Fury too often. The Sworn Sword Captain makes sense for these guys, just to give the enemy vulnerable, make them push a little harder. I don't hate putting Umber Champion on here, as since they get better as they get more injured, then the Umber Champion will make that even more so. But let's move on to Eddards Honor Guard. This is a special unit that you can only play if your commander is Eddard Stark, and of course Ned has to go right into these guys. They cost 7, so they're 2 more points than the normal Stark Sworn Swords. And for that, their dice get slightly better. They drop down to 7 and 6 instead of 5 and 4. Their defense gets better, and then they are fearless, meaning that they cannot suffer penalties to morale, so like Cersei or even really any of those Lannister cards that make your morale go down. None of that stuff can do anything, and they can't become panicked. Eddard's a really powerful commander. He's really good tactics cards, but they only work if Eddard's still around. So you want a defensive unit to put Eddard in, and these guys can fulfill that. That being said, 7 points. The Sworn Shields can do just as good of a job defending Eddard, and they cost the same. So it kind of depends on what your playstyle is here. I, in some ways, don't like the Honor Guard because Stark Fury is not an ability you probably want to use with Eddard in there. It's probably not worth taking those D3 wounds. Although Eddard has like his ability to heal himself, so I guess opening round, you know, it's your unit's fully healthy, you attack, and then you use Eddard to heal those back up. So that could work, I suppose. So it just kind of depends on your play style. I would maybe say the Sworn Shields are a little bit more defensive, but of course they're slower. And they are also a little more vulnerable to morale effects because these guys are fearless. So it just kind of depends on your playstyle. You're not going to put any attachments on these guys because the only person that can go on them is Eddard. In fact, you can't use them without him. So let's move on to our House Umber Beserkers. These guys are monsters, as anyone who's been following the game knows. They're very fast for infantry, speed 6. They hit on 3s, and they're the only unit in the game right now whose dice line gets better as they're injured. So 8, 9, and then finally 10 when they're down to their last rank. Bad defense and really good morale. And they have Sundering, which is something you should not forget about because piercing armor can be really good. There's these guys are of course better against those high armor targets, and then of course if you hit a unit with medium armor in the flank, they might be saving on 6s or not saving at all, and that is very powerful. These guys cost 7, and we're going to kind of see a theme here. It's like, well, do you want to put an attachment on a 7-cost unit? You can, but that makes it pretty expensive. But these guys are pretty fun, so sometimes you do want to throw some attachments on them. Non-Commander Rob's pretty good. Of course, he costs 3, but he ups their movement to 7, and they can charge for free off of the maneuver tactic spot. So that's pretty good. There's also some other kind of funny stuff you can do. Umber Champion is kind of a natural fit because he makes them better as they get injured. I don't really like the Umber Champion because I don't want to plan on my guys getting injured. I think Brienne's not a bad pick for these guys because since they're fast, they can probably get to whoever it is you select to use Brienne on. Brienne will give them +1 to hit and 2 more dice against one unit. So you can pick a unit with Brienne, and since you guys are fast, they can run over there, and now they're hitting on 2s and potentially, depending on how injured they are, rolling 12 dice with Sundering, which is fairly unstoppable. Another funny one actually is Mage Mormont. She gives them +2 morale, which means they're basically almost unbreakable without negative effects. And every time they pass a morale test, they deal 2 automatic wounds to anyone they're engaged with. So that's probably not the best use of a 3-point attachment on a 7 cost unit, but it's funny. I actually haven't tried it out yet, but I intend to. I think it'll be amusing. Alright, so these are the House Umber Great Axes. They are new, as in that they have been spoiled but not released. So let's talk about them. They're slow, speed 4, 4 defense, which is better than the other Umber unit, of course, and your standard morale. And then they have these 2 attacks, and they're very different. Executioner's Fury can only be used if they're already engaged, so not a charging attack. And then the defender does not get defensive saves against the attack, and on their last rank, it gains critical blow. Attacks that can't be saved are great for cracking through high armor units, like the Flayed Men, Lannister Guardsmen, and of course the Sworn Shields. So this is your can opener attack, which is very powerful, and the addition of critical blow means towards the end could mean a lot of damage going in. And second, we have Mighty Cleave, which is basically the opposite of Executioner's Fury, in that it's really good against low defense targets. So for each failed defensive save, the defender suffers 1 additional hit from this attack. So it means, of course, let's say you roll your 8 dice, you get 6 hits, and they only block 1 of them. That means they immediately take another 5 hits. So if you're charging in with a reroll on 3 pluses, you're going to get a bunch of hits. And if you're going against someone with low defense, this could deal crazy amounts of damage. And of course, if you were able to get into a flank, that are even less likely to succeed a save and take those hits, this is actually a good spot to play the Tactics card Northern Ferocity to give them Sundering, which again will allow them to really deal more and more damage with Mighty Cleave. I'm actually really impressed with these Great Axes. Of course, they're a little slow, and especially with like the rest of the fast Stark army, that could be a bit of a problem, but they are very multi-purpose. They're more than willing to tear up a high defense target, and they can just as easily chew into a low defense target and make them suffer. A really good unit, but of course 7 points, it's expensive, and it's slow, so those are the problems with it. Alright, so here is our House Tully Sworn Shields. Another slow unit, speed 4, hit on 3s, 7, 6, 4, save on 3s, average morale, and then once per turn, if they're attacked in their front, they can automatically block D3 hits, which in conjunction with their high defense means not a lot of damage is getting through. So these guys are slow, but you can use maybe the maneuver spot on the tactics board to move them up and hold an objective. Alternatively, you can bring them up and have them engage an enemy, hold them in place, while your faster units come in and hit that guy in the sides. Now, they are not invulnerable. Of course, there's enemy can always use morale tests on them. They have okay morale, but once you start stacking modifiers, they can panic just like anybody. Of course, there are a few units that can ignore defense completely in the game, so you want to watch out for those. Basically, try to keep your Sworn Shields on an opposite flank from your Greater Cleganes or other units that can pierce defense. This is another 7-point cost unit, so we have that same, should we put an attachment on these guys? So Brendan Tully, the infantry, is sort of a natural fit. He gives them a bonus to morale, which is kind of one of their weak points, and then every time they pass a morale test, they heal 2 wounds with him, which will keep them in the game even longer. So that's a thought. Here are our Stark Bowman. They cost 6 points. They hit on 4s, 6, 5, 4. A little bit worse on if they get into melee, 6, 4, 3. They have 5 defense, which is all you can really expect from a ranged unit. And for a Stark unit, they have bad morale, but again, it's kind of probably what you expect from a ranged unit. So the special attack is what we're here for. They have a long range attack. And if they do not shift before attacking, they get an additional 4 dice. So now we're talking about rolling 10 dice on 4s, which 4s isn't great, but that's not so bad. And then they can ignore interfering They can ignore intervening units and terrain, meaning they can shoot over like a wall or a forest or a Sworn Shield unit, which gives them quite a bit of usability. These guys probably do want an attachment. The thing that's jumping out at me is the CMON Warden. If they shoot at a unit that hasn't moved yet, they get reroll all the misses. So now we're talking about a 10 dice attack on 4s. Sure, 4s isn't good, but if we're putting the reroll in there, all of a sudden that's a lot of arrows coming down. Alternatively, you could potentially use Brawn to give them another 2 dice on the attacks. And then I talk about 12s on 4. That one also gives them a little bonus to their morale saves, but of course your enemy can kind of see what's coming. You have to use Brawn, you have to have the wealth tactics board spot, so that's probably not as useful, but still, it's a thought. Alright, now we're on our Stark Outriders. These guys also cost 7. They are the cheapest cavalry unit in the game right now, but they also kind of have the least amount of oomph, which is not to say that they aren't useful, but they're a little more, they're kind of delicate, so you want to keep an eye on them. They hit on 4s with 8 and then 5 dice. They save on 4s, which is probably one of the worst things about them. And then they got that standard Stark morale. So whenever they're attacked with melee, they can make a free retreat action afterwards. Basically what you want to do, you want to come in with these guys, hit someone in the flank. If they attack you back, then you take the hit and then you retreat, and you either go back into them or you go running off and looking for another enemy to hit. And these guys are also easy to get into combat because if you take the maneuver tactics board spot with them, you get a free charge instead of that maneuver. So that basically allows these guys to go zipping all over the place, hitting people, which is really good. As far as attachments, of course, there's not a lot of options. The 3-point Brendan Tully mounted attachment is interesting on them because every time they make a retreat, they will get D3 plus 1 wounds. So since they get free retreats, you could potentially heal a guy every time they're attacked, which is good. Keeps them in the fight a lot longer, which is the thing that these guys need. But then now, of course, we're talking about a 10-point unit instead of a 7-point unit. And would I rather have some Bolton Flayed Men? I'm not sure, but yeah, kind of. But anyway, those are our Outriders. And that takes us to the Dire Wolves. So, the Dire Wolves themselves don't actually cost anything, but you have to take other attachments to get them. So, if you take Rob as a commander, you're basically not paying anything because Horse Commanders don't cost anything. And that gives you Greywind. Or you could spend the 3-point version of Rob, the non-commander one, which is actually really good, and that will give you Greywind as well. To get Summer, you need to take Bran and Hodor, which also cost 3 points. So let's look at Greywind first. Speed 6, hits on 2 with 2 dice, defensive 3, which is good, but since he only has 2 wounds, it doesn't really matter. A full company is going to be able to kill him in one go, unless they get really unlucky or you get really lucky. Good morale, not a big issue. So then, yeah, he has his 2 wounds, and although he is a monster, he essentially is essentially cavalry. He gets a free maneuver just like a cavalry would at the start of an action. And then his special ability, when he attacks an enemy in the flank or rear, they become vulnerable. This is good for setting up, other attacks, obviously, and it doesn't have to hit. He just has to attack, and they'll become vulnerable. And of course, he could use that himself, but probably a larger unit with more dice is going to want to be the ones. And here is Summer. So Summer is basically identical, except for he gets free attacks if someone attacks Bran's unit, and that gives him additional dice. And then Bran can also use his power to give Summer additional hits as well. So neither Greywind or Summer are going to cause massive amounts of damage, but there's lots of things you can do with them that are really useful. You can hold objectives. You can also screen enemy attacks with them. You put them in between a flank and an enemy. The enemy has to attack them instead of hitting one of your more expensive units in the flank. So that's quite useful. And for low investment, you can get a few more units on the table, which can be very powerful. It gives you more activations, allows you to stall, gives you more options all around. So Direwolves are certainly worth taking, but they're just not going to cause huge amounts of damage. Okay, so that was the Stark units. Go ahead and hit me up in the comments to let me know which Stark unit you like running the most, and I'll see you later. Thanks for watching. Hey, you're still here. Since you are, I have a bit of a favor to ask. I don't just make crappy YouTube videos in my spare time. I also write novels and short stories. And I recently published a short story to Kindle called They Dance in Dark Suspension. It's basically the day in the life of a group of giant squid off the coast of India. If that sounds even a little bit interesting, do yourself and me a favor and check it out. I'm going to include a link in the description, and it's only $1. And if there's any Ironborn out there, it's what the drowned god would want. Thanks a lot, and what's dead may never die.